Welcome back to the Modest Mushroom and happy Thanksgiving. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a homemade apple pie from scratch. Both the filling and the crust for this recipe were from scratch, and it's actually easier than you might think. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do to make the pie, which I did a few hours in advance, is start getting the crust ready. So I'm going to start by cutting up a cup of butter into small cubes. Now that the butter is ready to go, we're going to start adding the rest of the crust ingredients into our food processor. So I'm going to be adding 2.5 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of sugar, and the cup of butter. After processing the ingredients for about 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to then take it and dump it into a large mixing bowl. And I'm going to start adding about 3 to 4 tablespoons of very cold water into it. And then we're just going to kind of start mixing it together with a spatula. And I just eventually used my hands, but just not for very long because we don't want the butter to melt. Once I have all of the crumbles mixed in and it looks a little bit more like a crust, I'm going to break it in half and wrap each half in some plastic wrap, and then we're going to store it in the fridge for 1 to 2 hours before using it. So now I'm going to go ahead and get started on making the filling. I have 5 Honeycrisp apples here that I thought I was going to use, but I actually only ended up needing 4 of them. So I'm going to peel and chop all of them. I'm cutting them into like 1/4 of an inch thick slices, and then we'll add those to a large mixing bowl with the rest of our filling ingredients. Along with the apples for the filling, I'm also going to be adding 3/4 of a cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of flour, 3/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And once we have all the ingredients in the bowl, we'll just mix it up well and set it aside. And now we start doing what is actually the most difficult part of making the pie, which is assembling everything, because I always have a hard time getting it to look pretty, even though it always tastes good. But I'm just going to start by rolling out our dough. I've had this in the fridge pretty much up until the moment I was ready to use it. We're just going to lightly flour the counter and the rolling pin a little bit and just roll it out as best you can. Sometimes it does take a little bit of work and some time, but you really want it to be cold so that you end up with a flaky crust. So now I'm just going to start getting the pie crust settled into my pie plate that I'm using. I have generously greased this with a lot of butter before doing this, and I did end up having some problems trying to get my pie crust to fit right in there, and I had like some breakage happening, which I had to patch up with some of my little extra pieces. And normally I would cut stuff like this out, but I just decided to leave it in because sometimes this happens. This might happen to you if you're trying to make it, so you can fix it if this does happen. So just don't freak out, it's okay, it's still gonna taste good. You can go ahead and add the filling to the pie now, and I'm just making sure the top is like sort of in an even layer. We don't want any apples sticking straight up that would break the pie crust on top. And then we're going to lay the other pie crust over top of it. And I'm just going to go around the edges of it and just seal it up, just to make sure none of the apple juices seep out to burn the bottom of the crust. There is like a giant rip on the top of my pie crust, but that's okay too, because I'm just going to use that as my air vent, because normally you have to cut those little slits in the top of the pie to let the steam out anyway, so that's just fine. And I'm also just going to throw a little crust heart on top of it too, just to pretend that it looks pretty. And then we're going to go ahead and bake this baby in the oven for about 40, I think I took mine out of 45 minutes. But I always set my timers early so that I can check on them at the end. So once it has this nice brown color on the top, that's how you know that the pie is done. And we want to make sure that it's all the way cooled down fully before we cut into it, because otherwise all of the other fillings will like just spill out the sides and it'll ruin the rest of the pie. So we have to wait till it's cool to cut into it. And I had never had homemade apple pie before I started making it, but I have to say this is the best apple pie recipe that I've ever had. It is so delicious, and I really hope that you will try it. Let me know in the comments if anybody out there ends up trying it for Thanksgiving. I'll also be making this too. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.
Trying hard to pretend that I'm okay. It's just a phase, and everything is going just great. I think about you a lot. It's almost like I can't stop.